With the sheer number of smartphones that went out this year, it's now very easy to lose track of the older ones that we typically anticipate. No thanks to the mid-range and premium mid-range that seemingly populated the market today, Xiaomi Mi 10T never really got the attention that it deserved. I guess it's because the Mi 10T Pro was the one given the highlight because of its 108 megapixel camera. In case you have forgotten, the Mi 10T is one of the successors to the Mi 9T or Redmi K20 family from last year. It is replacing the mid-range Mi 9T device with a flagship chipset in the Snapdragon 865, alongside a built-in 5G modem, a 64 megapixel triple camera system, and a very fast and fluid 144Hz refresh rate. So 30 days since its launch, these are my thoughts. One thing I didn't anticipate from the Mi 10T is its design. For a mid-range phone with a flagship chipset, Xiaomi was generous enough to offer a glass-metal-glass build. There is a 5000 mAh battery inside, which should make this phone a hefty one. But for some reason, I can barely feel the weight of the battery. On top of that, the curved back makes it easier to hold and grip with one hand. Apparently, the color that I have here is called Aurora Blue. At first, I thought it was lunar silver because that's what I ordered, and the phone looks a lot like silver in most lighting. But I was really blown away by the frosted finish on this one. At extreme angles, you'll notice that blue color shows a little bit. It still attracts fingerprints, but it's not that noticeable. And the frosted glass surface feels a lot better in the hands instead of the typically glossy glass. I also have to mention this metal frame that's really shiny in person. It kinda reminds me of the glossy stainless steel frame of the iPhone 12. Overall, this is a solid design that I really like to showcase and hate to put a case on. So since we have that Snapdragon 865 inside, there's still no microSD slot for expansion. The slit at the bottom is actually the dual SIM tray. And let me say this once, manufacturers should learn from the Mi 10T when it comes to SIM trays. There's a recessed portion of the tray that makes SIM installation easier and more secure. This is something I really appreciate a lot because installing two SIM cards on my Galaxy Note 9 has always been a pain. But if there's one thing Xiaomi needs to improve in, that's the stereo speakers. Obviously, this one is much louder and better than most mid-range devices today. But the quality is trebly and tinny and can distort in some cases, especially when playing bass-heavy sounds. Perhaps one of the most exciting and controversial features on this phone is the display. It is exciting because it's a 144Hz panel, but it's controversial because it's using IPS LCD. Let me start first with the refresh rate. This display made Poco X3 NFC look bad to my eyes, due to the better software optimization as well as the extra punch the chipset provides. This phone just flies. Whether you're scrolling, switching tasks, or playing, this is such a joy to use. It's also adaptive, so the refresh rate changes between 144 and 48 Hz depending on the content you're watching. During my period with the Poco phone, I noticed that its adaptive panel switched back to 60 Hz as soon as I open any video app. But with the Mi 10T, other than the camera app, every app takes advantage of the high refresh. Even when I'm watching a video on YouTube while scrolling through my subscription feed, it's still buttery smooth. I'm really amazed at how fast the screen adapts from the moment my hands touch the panel. I'm mostly used to this phone at 144Hz and my battery usage always returns 6 hours of screen time. There's an option to use 90Hz that extends my screen time to 30 to 45 minutes. I'm also surprised that 90Hz is almost as fluid as 144. The difference between the two is almost imperceptible. There are a few games that can play up to 144Hz, but you need to set the graphics settings one level below the max preset. And I also found that the Mi 10T heats up less than the Poco X3 NFC when pushed to its limits. Now for the IPS LCD panel. This is by far the best IPS LCD on a phone that I have seen. Xiaomi calibrated the heck out of this LCD to make it almost as good as an AMOLED. In fact, out of the box, it has the same warm tint that all AMOLED phones have. You can reduce the warmness of the screen in setting by choosing a preset or calibrating the color yourself. The color saturation is almost veering towards AMOLED territory as well as the black levels. It's really that good. It's also bright as well, albeit not as bright as my Samsung phone. I usually have the screen brightness around 80 to 100%. There's one bug that I still can't figure out though. You might encounter the display turning yellow suddenly as if the blue light filter was applied. But toggling on and off the reading mode fixes this bug easily. So for the display, no complaints here. I definitely don't mind switching for this one even if I'm coming from AMOLED. So that brings us then to the cameras. It's easy to be fooled by the camera module as it looks like a pentagon setup. But make no mistake, the Mi 10T is only packing 3 cameras on the back and a 20 megapixel selfie on the front. But the 64 megapixel camera on the back, this one is a solid shooter. There's practically no problem when shooting under good lighting. Even with no dedicated telephoto lens, the 5x digital zoom looks sharp. The only challenging part for the camera here is indoor lighting. Like most huge camera sensors, the detail quality and color accuracy fall apart, resulting in kinda smudgy images. I think this is because the camera app increases the ISO a little too much just to give you a brighter look than what you're trying to capture. But that doesn't mean the overall image is bad. For the most part, they are very good, and most of you won't probably notice the drawbacks. I also find the portrait mode to be better than phones with a dedicated portrait lens. And the best part about it, it works on pets. The 13 megapixel ultra-wide won't always match the white balance of the main camera, but detail preservation is plenty sharp for what it is. It can easily expose the clouds as well as the sun in a midday. Though the ultra-wide struggles a lot in low light conditions, just toggle night mode on and you are good to go. Honestly, capturing night mode photos are fast and the quality is sharp, bright, and colorful. The same applies to the main sensor, obviously. I would say the Mi 10T's cameras perform better in photos than videos. You really need to have good lighting to get clean looking video quality. In a reasonably lit yet roofed establishment, the noise is really obvious in most areas of the video. You can record up to 60 FPS in 4K, which gives you the ability in post to slow-mo, but you also have the bonus of recording up to a whopping 8K at 30 frames. If you do want that extra sharpness from your video, 8K looks fantastic outdoors. The highlights get blown out just a little bit, but the clarity of the video is just so good. There's also no cropping when shooting in 8K. One advice, however, that I want to put out is don't use digital zoom when using 8K. The quality just looks terrible for some reason. There's a 5 megapixel macro lens here as well. It's hard to get decent looking images even with great lighting, but it's there if you feel experimental. For the 20 megapixel selfie camera, it is usable but nothing groundbreaking. You can only record up to 1080 at 30 frames and the viewfinder crops in really close when switching from photo to video, but selfie stabilization is quite good and portrait cutouts are almost always accurate. I would say the selfie camera is almost on par with the Galaxy Note 9. The 5000 mAh battery can last a full day, but you can kill it if you really try to. Though 90Hz saves a little bit of battery, 60Hz really is the way to go if you want to get up to 2 days worth of usage. There's a 33 watts charger here. It's not as fast as Xiaomi claims. I still need an hour and 10 minutes to go from 0 to 100, but for most people I believe that's already fast enough. So with the Xiaomi Mi 10T, what's the catch? So far, there's great battery, great display, very good and versatile cameras, and a great design. So what's the catch? You'll probably hate me for saying this given the title of this video, but there's literally no catch. Yes, there are ads and quirks within Xiaomi's first-party apps, but they can be disabled in settings and they're not as obtrusive as you might have imagined. The Mi 10T costs 19,990 pesos for the base model with 6GB RAM and 128GB storage, and sometimes you can get that for as low as 16,990 pesos. There is an 8GB version that costs, I think, a couple thousand more if you want a bit of future-proofing. This phone is just a very capable device for 2020 and, I think, can hold up until 5G coverage gets better. Yes, there is 5G support here, albeit single SIM only. And since it has an amazing LCD panel, you don't have to worry about burn-in plaguing this phone even after a couple of years worth of usage. Well done, Xiaomi. That's been it. Until the next one, stay safe.